Choice moves, Butlin. You're like a panther with a disposition for destruction.
What do you say, Toby? The truth.
Looks like shit.
That's why I love children, no guile. It does look like shit.
Psst, check out my Patreon. Ugh. So, because 1 wasn't enough, this is our second season 2 episode where Bubbles is somehow talented enough to take the place of one of her sisters in an activity that is super important to them, thus making them extremely jealous and plotting to stop her from taking the enjoyment away from what they believe to be theirs. And just like A Star Is Blossom, which is what I'm referencing, this episode is terrible too. But hey, at least there's no love interest in this one. So, where do I begin? Well, Buttercup is playing deathball with her Derbyton friends while Bubbles cheers from the sidelines. You got Malin, Jalen, Babasuza Raylan, who are all getting their asses whooped by Buttercup because she's just that incredible of a player. Oh, and apparently we briefly get to learn that their school team name is the Townsville Toucans. Why Toucans? I have no idea. There's not really much of a correlation to why it would be toucans of all things, so I'm gonna guess it's because alliteration and leave it at that.
Choice moves, Butlin. You're like a panther with a disposition for destruction.
Wow, we're using all kinds of figurative language today, aren't we? Alliteration, simile, hyperbole. Let me guess, next you're gonna shove some onomatopoeia in there too. Fair warning, this is the recurring gag for the episode, and yes, it gets old very, very fast. Why there's a panther head on a human body despite the fact there's no reference to humans at all in Malin's comparison is beyond me. As established in Princess Buttercup, Buttercup is so unbelievably talented at deathball that her strike on Jalen literally results in her getting sent to the hospital in a full body cast, causing her immense pain that will likely leave her with permanent physical damage for the rest of her life. So, good going, Buttercup. As one might expect, this results in the Derbitants trying to find a replacement player because apparently this team only has enough members to play without a single alternate or backup. Normally, this wouldn't be such a big deal because this is just a side hobby the Derbitants play by themselves, but apparently it's an official school sport now because there's an epic deathball tournament coming up that they need to find a replacement for, and fast. Otherwise, they won't stand a chance against the undefeated Fear Leaders. You know, like fear instead of cheer. Oh, how hysterical. Well, anyways, Malin's like, hey, what about your sister? And before she knows it, Bubbles is lying on the court screaming for her life.
Bubbles, you're acting like a beaver in a salamander fight! Get your head in the game!
Yeah, needless to say, Bubbles had no idea what she was getting into. And to comment on these constant similes for a second here, not only do Malin's countryisms make about as much sense as a screen door on a submarine, but this literally looks like something an inexperienced high school student would whip up in their first ever graphic design class. And I'm not knocking students who are still learning because, well, obviously they're still learning, but this was made by supposed professionals. You kinda have higher standards for those, don't you think? This is supposed to be a professionally made cartoon, and yet here we are using 9th grade Photoshop skills. Why couldn't this have been animated? Well, it's a part of the show's style. No, it's not. The show doesn't have a style. It's a random jumbled mess from episode to episode. There's no style here. What, is this supposed to be funny because it's bad? Bitch, please, if I want to amuse myself with poorly photoshopped images, I'll just make them myself or go on a website. Furthermore, Malin uses this line in such a way that it implies a negative attitude or mannerism towards Bubbles. I mean, logically, seeing as she isn't prepared to play the game, one can conclude that Malin would be a little irked by this. So then why the hell does the image show the beaver punching the salamander? If the beaver is supposed to be Bubbles, and Bubbles is failing at deathball, why is the beaver succeeding at boxing? How incompetent can this show get? Anyways, Bubbles somehow manages to score after being tossed the ball because she's just magically extremely talented at deathball, just like how she was magically extremely talented at acting and magically extremely talented at computer programming. It's gotten to the point that it feels like there's nothing she can't do.
Shredded harder than a woolly mammoth with a mohawk.
You know, someone could have bothered to actually draw and animate this concept, but I guess shitty Photoshop skills were deemed good enough. And for the record, I wouldn't be harping on these lines so much if it only happened like once or twice. Heck, most running gags in this show follow the rule of 3, but not this one. You want to know how many times this running gag pops up in the episode? Keep watching and you'll see. So the entire Derbitants team then goes off to praise Bubbles for being this outstanding player who can somehow score goal after goal after goal even better than her sister without trying. And this leaves Buttercup dumbfounded, pissed, and jealous all at the same time.
And then Malin said that I was faster than a cheetah that really has to use the bathroom.
You can't flush in an outhouse, nitwits. We're not even 3 minutes in and we've already had 4 of these gags. Good lord. I guess it's worth noting that this Dr. Tankenstein monster was destroying Townsville and Blossom had to fight him all by herself while Buttercup and Bubbles were at deathball practice.
While you two were at practice, I had to fight Dr. Tankenstein all by myself. Ow!
So Blossom's complaining because she had to do it alone when her sister should have been there. Now, not only did Buttercup or Bubbles never receive a call on screen during this episode, so how could we have possibly known he was attacking the city, especially when we see shots of the city in the background and everything looks hunky-dory, but you'd think Blossom would do more than just lie on the ground and let the beast run her over. You can make the scene funny without letting the character look pathetic. So Malin calls and says Bubbles is a permanent team member because Jalen isn't going to be better anytime soon, especially since Malin literally broke her hand off, so this upsets Buttercup even more. Next, we get a montage where Bublin, as she's now officially called, scores a bunch of goals and Buttercup sucks, so she sits in the corner when Blossom calls her on the phone to say that Tankenstein is on the loose again. I guess one recurring gag wasn't enough for this episode, so it decided to double dip. Well, anyways, without Blossom saying anything of the sort, Buttercup thanks her for giving her the idea to sabotage Bubbles' ability to play and proceeds to follow through with doing just that, even though in no way did Blossom give her that idea. Later that night, it's the Townsville Deathball Championships, and apparently it's already the final match, even though we haven't seen the Derbitants face off against any other team in existence in order to get to the gold medal fight. Literally, the only footage we have of them is them playing against themselves, so how the fuck are we supposed to gauge whether or not they're actually good enough to make it to the finals?
We're live here at the Deathball Championships between the hometown heroes, the Derbitants, and the undefeated Townsville Tech Fear Leaders.
Wait, so they're not the Townsville Toucans now? But the Townsville Toucans banner was hanging on their building earlier in the episode. And no wonder the Fear Leaders are undefeated. They're a bunch of college students going up against elementary school kids. And Bubbles has a bobblehead now, even though she's literally never played an official match of deathball before tonight, so literally nobody outside of the team actually knows how skilled she is. Malin also makes another one of her stupid similes.
Now that Jalen's back, the Fear Leaders stand as much of a chance as a bobcat without reservations for dinner.
So, did other matches occur and we just skip straight to the finals? Was this the only match of the night? Has this tournament been going on for weeks? Is it even a tournament? I have no idea. I don't know.
Things are exciting here, Bob, and not just because it's Bubbles Bobblehead Day.
That's right, Nick.
Bob and Nick, eh? Where have I heard those names before? Yeah, this is something I'd been meaning to point out for a while now, but I just never got around to it. Well, maybe I have covered it in a previous review that was a long time ago, but I've made so many of these things that I can't really remember if I have or not. So yeah, add that to the never-ending list of staff members that get their own character inserted into the show. Buttercup brings back Jalen in an attempt to get Bubbles kicked off the team since she wouldn't have to substitute anymore. Malin welcomes Jalen back in open arms. Bubbles is okay with this and proceeds to leave. Malin decides to keep Bubbles on the team. This shocks Buttercup. Buttercup finds out that Malin is making her sit out instead. Buttercup pissed. Bubbles oblivious. Malin jerk. Listen, if this episode isn't gonna try, then why should I? Oh, that's right, because I actually care about my audience. Malin claims Bubbles' amazing skills are what got them there, but again I ask, when did this happen? If this was a single match, then they were already going to play this team before Bubbles even joined them, and if this was a tournament, why didn't we get to see a single other match? Here's what bugs me most of all about this episode. Not only is it a complete carbon copy of what was already done in the same season with a slight tweak here and there, but just because Bubbles is skilled doesn't mean Buttercup should automatically lose all of her talent. Even if Bubbles becomes the new best player on the team, Buttercup is still the second best. The beginning of the episode established this. Buttercup cleans house so hard while the rest of the team doesn't even stand a chance. She is clearly superior to them in terms of her death ball skill. Malin is such a shitty friend to Buttercup if she's going to make their second best player sit out because she suddenly replaces her with Bubbles. And see, that's just it. There could have been a reason for this, such as the excuse that Buttercup has been extremely negative and jealous around them lately. Have her sit out because she's got a bad attitude and not being a very good sportsman or something. But no, there's no reason. Buttercup's like, who's gonna sit out? And it cuts to her on the bench. Why? As a form of punishing her for trying to sabotage Bubbles? Well, gee, maybe that'd make more sense if the characters actually saw through Buttercup's intentions instead of remaining oblivious to it. Nobody realizes that Buttercup bringing Jalen back is an attempt to get rid of Bubbles. And like A Star is Blossom, Bubbles is also completely unaware of her sister's obvious annoyance and jealousy throughout all of this. I mean, I get that some people are more talented than others, but how about you sit down and have some respect for your sisters? Clearly the school play and death ball meant way more to Blossom and Buttercup than Bubbles respectively. Bubbles is only partaking in this sport because it's fun. It's not like it means the world to her the way it does to her sister. If anything, this makes Bubbles look like a selfish jerk who can't seem to comprehend the fact that she's ruining her sister's big night. Like, I don't care how oblivious she can be, even comedic relief characters can understand when their family or friends are upset. Bubbles is fully capable of speaking up and saying that she doesn't want to play if Buttercup can't. You'd think that she would know her sister well enough to notice her sitting out during practice or being bothered at dinner. But whatever, Bubbles keeps playing and Buttercup sits out. This show isn't about sisterhood after all, ladies and gentlemen. And let me point out the fact that at the very start of the game, the scoreboard says it's 20-19 with 15 seconds to go in the second half. So once again, it just goes to show that this cartoon is a lost cause. And so the game begins, and as you'd expect, Bubbles just utterly dominates against the undefeated Fear Leaders because she's just that gifted at Death Ball. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. They're seriously using the MLG air horn sound effect right now. God, this show just doesn't know when to quit, does it? Buttercup sure has, at least, as she sits on the sidelines envious of Bubbles while Blossom crawls in utter agony as she aches from the pain of dealing with Tankenstein for a third time.
Aren't we having so much fun?
You certainly are.
I thought you liked playing with me.
Gee, Bubbles, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've just been sitting on the bench for the entire game. Yeah, the sisters have a bit of a discussion, but it just results in Buttercup casting her out and Blossom complaining on the sideline, making Bubbles feel bad about what's going on. So Bubbles gets back on the court but fakes an injury so Buttercup can play again, and then Malin says a thing.
Kid, you got more heart than a lungfish on a kidney bean.
Okay, wait, what the fuck? How come last time Bubbles got angry that Blossom wasn't respecting her accomplishments, but now here she feels guilty for taking the spotlight away from Buttercup? Well, which one is it? Is it that the girls should be respectful and happy for Bubbles' accomplishments, or that Bubbles should be respectful for her sister's passion? I also find it ironic that considering Buttercup is clearly the favorite of the show, and so she's put in the sympathetic role for this episode, but when it was Blossom experiencing this exact same thing, she was made out to be the bad guy. And then Buttercup gets on the field and is about to make a shot until she gets shot.
She's got a clear shot.
Oh, and it appears the Fear Leaders are cyborgs, Bob.
And they're suddenly robots now because what the fuck? Why? This is so needlessly unnecessary. Like, they couldn't just be regular people, they had to be buffed up into cyborgs who want to kill the girls for no reason other than they were programmed to win the Death Ball Championship? By who? Why? What is the point? This is pathetic. And with the two sisters ignoring Blossom's cries of agony, they kill all the robots while playing Death Ball, and the announcers make another comparison.
That thing looks tougher than a bear with a crossbow.
7. They shoved 7 of these lame-ass images into this episode. Now, the joke already got old after the first image, but 7 times? Seriously? You're running this joke into the ground so much you may as well have killed the joke before you even told it. And then Tankenstein comes in and kills everybody. The end. This episode is garbage. At least most other episodes try to make sense. What is the lesson here? Buttercup attempted to sabotage her sister and get her kicked off the team so she could have the spotlight, and then Bubbles feels bad for her despite the fact that she has nothing to do with Buttercup being on the team because it's Malin's decision of who gets to play and who sits out. Buttercup does not deserve to play because she attempted to sabotage the team, yet she was being treated unfairly by her teammates before she did this, so they're the reason she acted this way in the first place, not to mention the fact that she refuses to pay attention to her sister Blossom as she cries in agony for help, and then at the end the episode makes us feel bad for Buttercup because she's not getting what she wants after she's gone from being sympathetic to being guilty, so Bubbles fakes an injury so Buttercup can play, and then the two play together anyways because there was never a match to begin with because these fear leaders were cyborgs the whole time. So they're both allowed to play now with all the other teammates on the field, even though they couldn't before. What the hell? How come Malin never apologizes or gets her comeuppance for treating Buttercup like trash? Is this because the fear leaders were cyborgs so anything goes? Every single main character is at fault for something here, except for Blossom, and yet nobody gets blamed for anything except Blossom. You know, most episodes like this where both teams break the rules tend to result in them both being disqualified and the award going to the third place team, but this reboot doesn't do anything with that. Yeah, it's a trope, but at least it makes sense. The moral that I found in this episode is literally ignore anybody asking for your help and sabotage your friends until you get them to give you what you want. You're not supposed to reward the girl who's being a selfish brat. I can't believe I'm saying this, but at least, A Star is Blossom got that part right. How do you make 2 of the same episode in the same season, yet fuck up the moral this badly the second time around when you have the same premise with a different character and activity? It's just Buttercup and Death Ball instead of Blossom and the play. 0 out of 10. Do not waste your time on this. What a disaster.